Hello everyone, my name is Chase Mitchell. I'm the CTO of AviateVFR, and today we're going to be planning a route from San Luis Obispo to Torrance, California. We can simply do this in our 3D VFR sectional using our satellite view. We can click on our airspaces or on our departure airport's airspace, get our card, press start, and then we can zoom out and get a lay of the land and see what our potential route might be going over, around, or near. We can pan on over to Torrance and zoom in. And so it should be noted that Torrance is underneath a Class Bravo shelf, and we will need to address it correctly. And so we'll do that a little bit later on, but for now, we can simply zoom in, get a lay of the land, and see what the area is like. We can click on our destination's airspace, like our departure airspace, and then see the information on that card right there and select destination. We will automatically get a dialog because we are underneath that Class Bravo, and we'll need to figure out how we want to handle it. So we can start by, there are a few ways that we can do it. We can stay clear and descend, which is the top option there, but that's going to put us out over the water, which is probably not something you'd want to do. Instead, we're going to be using our VFR transition routes that we've digitized from the terminal area chart for Los Angeles. So we're going to be using the special flight rules area. This is a pretty common VFR route, especially going into Torrance or Long Beach or something like that. And then we can see exactly how that route is going to work. So for the special flight rules area, you need to be on a specific radial and you need to be at a certain altitude to go through that LAX surface area. It's highlighted in red, and all the airspace that you're crossing is in red. And so as you can see, we're going to be crossing through that, again, LAX special flight rules area. And then once we're sort of happy with how that looks, we can press select transition. From here, we can just zoom out again and get a big picture look at our route and what it's going to look like. And we can see exactly once everything populates. So that's why we're moving that window around a little bit. Then we can set our cruising altitude and then move on to performance. So we're going to be setting up our weight and balance because as a pilot, you need to know exactly how much your aircraft is going to weigh and make sure that's within that CG envelope. From here, we can take a look at our takeoff. So this is going to take into account your winds and then your weight, and then we're also going to be using your aircraft's electronic POH to give you those takeoff and landing distances. We can take a look at our climb and see what our climb profile is going to look like in respect to altitude, and then also the temperature for that day. We can set our cruise performance, and then we can move on to landing, which is pretty similar to takeoff. Again, we can visualize the wind component with those particles on the map right there, and then see what our crosswind and headwind component is, and then just press plan route. From here, AviateVFR will automatically find a safe and legal VFR route from San Luis Obispo into Torrance. So you can see that it's generated right there, and then we can zoom in and take a little bit of a closer look. So we're going to be flying from San Luis Obispo over to Oceano, and then overflying Santa Maria a little bit, and then moving on to Santa Barbara and just staying up along the coast. And yeah, so AviateVFR automatically keeps us away from that sharp terrain or that high terrain, and then also automatically shows where we need to start descending to get below that Class Bravo shelf and get to 3,500 feet so that we can correctly use that special flight rules area. So we will also automatically be put on to that correct heading and cross through the special flight rules area just as the FAA intended when they built out the terminal area chart. From here, we can take a deeper look at the performance for our route. So we want to have an understanding of of things like climb and cruise. So our climb performance is only calculated after we run our route because we need to know where we're going to make sure that we're not going to be running into any terrain. So AviateVFR visualizes and calculates your climb performance in a pretty unique way. So we build out something called your climb cone, which is basically your best rated climb swept out in 360 degrees, shown in blue right there in that 3D view. From here, we can visualize terrain in yellow and red, and then move on to our cruise performance. So our cruise is coming from our aircraft's POH once again, and that power setting for your cruise. So we're going to estimate your fuel burn, how fast it's going to take to get there, and then if we wanted to add in a fuel stop for whatever reason, if we took off with lower fuel, we could do that pretty easily here. Again, all POH data tables. Then we can once again take a look at our landing, see how our route is going to intersect with our traffic pattern, and then move on to take a look at our route by flying it in AviateVFR's fly route option. So as we can see, this is going to visualize everything that you need to see along the route as if you were actually flying it. So you can do that before you ever leave the ground and make sure that you aren't missing something really important. And then also just really helps to give some good context for what's going to be happening along the route. So we keep it at 5x, 30x speed just to make sure that you're doing it quickly. But we can also pause along the way at important points to make sure that we have an understanding of what's going on. As you can see here, we're overflying Santa Maria, and so that's going to give us a reference point for about a quarter of the way through the route, and we can see where in relation to that we're going to be. And then we can fast forward and fly over another next big checkpoint, which would be Santa Barbara. We can see that we're clear of that airspace, and we can also see the coast and the mountain range, and also have good orientation for when we're flying over that. We're flying along the coast now and just making sure that we're clear of mountains and that nothing else would be too sketchy or something that we would need to be worried about. And then the big one here is visualizing what it's going to look like when we're going through that Class Bravo, and how it's going to look going into that special flight rules area. So for a lot of pilots, this causes a lot of anxiety because there's a lot going on, and we're just going to try to take that overflow of information and reduce it down a little bit, because you will have seen a lot of what you're going to be seeing beforehand, especially if you're doing this the night before or something like that. So you can see exactly what heading you're going to be on. You can see landmarks such as the coastline. You can see that we're going to be actually flying over LAX, which is a big surprise for a lot of people, and it can be a little bit intimidating. And so there will be jets coming in underneath you, that sort of thing, and that you can start to visualize and anticipate and be ready for it, so that you're less overwhelmed in the cockpit when you actually are flying it. So then you can take a look at visual landmarks from your perspective at your altitude. You can see the road over there, the highway. You can see where the airspace comes down, and so you can start to visualize, okay, when am I going to be clear of this airspace, just by looking at the cockpit, because you will have seen this visualization beforehand, and you'll know, okay, when I cross that big road right there, I'm going to be clear of the airspace, so I'll stay on that radial heading a little bit longer, and then I can start to deviate to make my way down into Torrance, something like that. So yeah. From here, we can take a look at our bottom tab, our route output tab. So this is just going to give you the navigational information that you're going to need to fly your route. So you have our waypoints, we have our course, heading, magnetic heading, ground speed, wind, that sort of thing. And then we have some other auxiliary information like frequencies. And then we also have our airspace table. So this is going to show you the airspace that you're going to be crossing, going near, and then also their schedules if you just click on them. And then it also breaks down what your emergency landing options are going to be based off of your aircraft's glide performance and the terrain that you're going to be flying over and in. So we can go into our 2D section now and get a little bit of a visualization for that. So your emergency landing options on this route are going to be shown in those little purple dots right there. And then if we pull up the table, we can simply click on each one and the map will zoom in on it and we can see where it's at. And then we can also see the services that they provide, and then the weather and the runway length and that sort of thing. This is just going to help you visualize where and when you might be in trouble if you were to lose an engine or if you did need to make an emergency stop. So it's just good to be aware of those things before you take off, because you never know what's going to happen. From here, we can use our AI briefing tool. So our AI briefer is going to give you a little bit more of that local knowledge. So we're using the data shown in green that we have compiled for your route, and then it also does a search for local knowledge and information for the route in 3 different areas: weather, airspace, and terrain. So it's just going to break down some of that more nuanced and harder to come by folk knowledge, I guess, or just sort of populist knowledge that is really important to know about before you leave the ground, but it's sometimes difficult to come by, especially if you're flying in this area for the first time. So for example, we were able to identify that sometimes in Santa Barbara, flying over those mountains in the evenings or at night, there's a bit of a downwash, and a senior pilot in a forum had identified this and said that he's lost altitude very quickly, multiple times coming over that grade. It's not going to be too much of a factor here because we're going to be at 7,500 feet, but it's just good to know about in case we did need to deviate into Santa Barbara. Again, we're going to have a breakdown of airspace and some of the quirks that come along with that. And then lastly, we're just going to have an ATP or a CFI breakdown of whether or not this is a good route to fly and help you break down whether or not a go or no-go decision should be made. So yeah, from there we can move on to our dynamic briefing. And so this is just going to be something that's pretty typical that you're going to see in your standard EFB, but instead of a static chart or a static no-go zones or static warning areas, we're going to be able to pull up a more dynamic briefing, and we're going to be able to show you exactly what you need to be concerned about at your time of flight. So that's exactly what the router does, and it's exactly what the router sees. And it should be what you're doing by hand already, but we're just going to be highlighting each one in red when it becomes active and when you need to worry about it in your flight. And so you can see some airspace is active during our time of flight, and then also there's a little bit of terrain that you're going to be seeing off to your left that's pretty high, but it's not something that we need to be worried about too much, but it's just something that you should take into account as you're going into your flight. So yeah. From here, we can move on to our export options. AviateVFR works pretty cleanly with ForeFlight and Garmin Pilot. And so you can take the route that you just built here and export into either one of those and take them into the cockpit. And if you are a student pilot and you're going to be flying with a VFR navlog, you can use our custom-built VFR navlogs that have your visual aids and then also the checkpoints along the route, and it's automatically filled out for you. And with that brings our tutorial and walkthrough to a conclusion. Thank you for sticking with us, and fly safe.